Time keeps on leaving and we keep on moving. When do we pass on our wisdom to the youth? My veteran story, lost arts discussions, fireside chats with a bourbon or two. It's time to hear the stories by our military veterans. Get yourself ready, it's the Lost Arts Podcast. The Lost Arts with Andrew Cox. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Lost Art Podcast. That podcast has given a voice to our veterans. On today's episode, we have Zach Roberts back on the program to discuss the rest of his veteran story. If you are enjoying the podcast, and consider being a TLA patron. That's the Lost Arts patron. It is with donors that we are able to continue recording these podcasts and getting our veteran community voices out for all to hear. Just go to the website, The Lost Art with Andrew Cox, and click on the Become a Patron link. Any donation is appreciated. If you would like to be a guest on our podcast and tell your story, then email me at thelostartwithandrewcox@gmail.com. Again, that's thelostartwithandrewcox@gmail.com. All right, without further ado, please welcome back Zach Roberts. Zach, how you doing?
Doing good. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. So the last time we were talking, we were coming to the close of your career when it came to your active duty time. So why don't we go ahead and start there, that transition going from active duty back to the civilian populace.
For sure. So, I think I closed last time by saying, overall my 4 years was very short, although, at the time being so young, it felt like it was just dragging on. And, you get to that point, where you're about, that 3.5 year mark. And you kind of start thinking and people start asking you, well, are you going to re-enlist or
Right.
are you going to go and get out and everything? And so that was weighing on my mind quite heavily. And I really wasn't quite sure what I was going to do yet. But at that time, I was more leaning towards getting out. So me and my buddy, I think you probably remember Ryan Jones, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember him.
So him and I got this great idea that we were going to, we went to the depot had like this job fair for Marines. Right. And, it was basically just other OC fields and stuff, like looking for, people because they were short.
Right.
And at the time, MSG duty was like super low, apparently. Okay. So we ended up running into the guys that were, hiring for that, and they were like all about us. They wanted us so bad. I think Ryan and I had like packages all set to go, like getting approved for top secret clearances and stuff within like a few weeks. It was,
oh, wow.
I mean, it was so quick. And then, we both submitted them and we didn't hear anything, and we're like, well, man, is stuff like good to go or not? And then, I think I got pulled into, Chief Warrant Officer Davis's office at one point, and he's like, you're about, I forget how many points I was shy on my audition score or something in order to actually go and do MSG duty. So I basically got denied because of that. And I was like, well, that sucks. Like, cause my intentions were not to come back to the band field. I wanted to go and see the rest of the Marine Corps and, do that sort of thing.
Right.
So with that, I was like, man, my options are basically to, stay here and go to another band and pretty much do the same thing I've been doing, which, it was fun traveling and everything like that, going and meeting different people and kind of the special jobs that you get to do. But I wanted something, I want to go and see the rest of the Marine Corps. That didn't happen. So I decided, I'm going to get out and I'm going to go back to college, and use my GI Bill, which, at the time that thing was pretty brand new at the time. So you got, it's a 4 full year ride.
Mm-hmm.
And they pay for your books, your tuition, and you can go in any school. Doesn't matter.
Oh, wow.
It's all covered. So I did that. I got out and I started going to college right away. I was going down to National University in San Diego there, which it was more of like a part-time school. So I was doing like 3 days a week per se. Um, and I started going for nursing right away.
Okay.
And the whole nursing thing, I remember we were on tour up in Chicago, and there was we were driving on the interstate going into like downtown, and there was this accident that was on the interstate, and this motorcyclist had got hit by a car.
Mm.
And so it was me and a few of the other Marines, and we got out and we kind of go up there, and there's people standing around this guy, but no one's doing anything to help him.
Oh, wow.
And I'm just like, you guys got to be kidding me. Like, someone's got to know, be a nurse, something like that. Well, so I go up there and I just kind of start helping them. And, I mean, we get the kind of basic combat medical training that you get in boot camp. And really, that's about it. But, so I go up there and I'm talking to the guy. And surprisingly, he's coherent and everything. And I think his name was Mike, if I remember right.
Okay.
But we were like talking about his family and stuff. And I just see this big pool of blood next to him.
Right.
But I couldn't see where the heck he was bleeding from.
Huh.
It was the weirdest thing. So, and I think paramedics and fire and stuff, they showed up probably within, it was like 5-10 minutes, but there was so much traffic.
Right.
But it was pretty much from that point on that I kind of decided I want to do something in like the nursing field. So that's what drew me to this.
I got you. Okay.
So I was doing nursing, and then I lived back out in San Diego for another year with Austin Jones. So we had an apartment together. It was good times. I'm pretty sure you probably remember him, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Great
I
guy.
sure
We
do.
had some very fun times together. So we were living together, and I was pretty much just going to college and doing what, a Marine that was freshly discharged honorably does in their off time, pretty much just go out, party, hang out at the beaches, hang out with friends. Cause throughout my time, I made a lot of friends outside of the Marine Corps too out there, which, kind of helped that transition out.
Right.
You hear a lot of veterans, talk about like having some issues assimilating back into human society afterwards.
Right.
And I should just say society in general. And for me, it really wasn't all that hard because I had friends that were outside of the military, and they were really good friends. Like we hung out almost on a daily basis,
Right.
just going and doing different things, whether it was going to the gym, going to the beach, going out at night. So that helped, and I'm very thankful for that too.
Yeah,
Because
it's always good. Like, and I try to tell people this too, is like, while you're active duty, don't just hone in on just your military friends, although that's going to be a big part of what you do. You need to venture out as well and make friends on the civilian side, and that way you have contacts, you have people that can help you, and you just have kind of a better way forward once you get out. So you were doing it the right way the whole time, making sure that you had a different way of approaching things once you got out.
Yeah, and and it's funny how that just kind of naturally happened.
Hmm.
Because I was like the shyest kid ever in high school. I wouldn't really like talk to anyone. I had my solid group of a handful of friends, and then I just kind of kept to myself for the most part. But then the
Right.
Marine Corps, like that's another way it changed my life. Like I probably would never be doing this, like talking to you right now, doing this podcast if I hadn't gone through the Marine Corps, and you get that new confidence level, and you become just a whole new person in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Very true.
but yeah, having those friends, through that were off base, that once Liberty sounded, I could leave base and go and hang out with them and just kind of clear your mind of some of the stressors that go on in the military and stuff.
Right.
That helped a lot, and I think that's what some veterans unfortunately didn't have, and that's can kind of set some of them down kind of a wrong path. There's
Hmm.
still a lot of homeless veterans out there. And I always kind of wonder, it's like, where did they get off the beaten path? Like what happened when they transitioned out or in their lives that, landed them in the place where they are now?
Yeah, absolutely.
And those are good questions. I want to get somebody from like the VA on a podcast eventually to talk about some of those things because
Yeah.
they see a wide variety of individuals that come through and everything, and kind of maybe give their insight on some of that, because that is something that's very interesting thing. Like what happens to an individual? Some people get out and they're very successful. Some people get out and they struggle. What's the difference? How does that work? Is it something that you did in the military versus something that, what you did when you got out? It's very interesting stuff there.
Oh, for sure, for sure. It's a very good question, and some of it still kind of puzzles me, honestly. But you know what I mean. Oh, I used
Yeah.
to work at the VA, and we'll kind of get there here in a few minutes too. And but yeah, so for that first year going to college, and then just hanging out with friends and doing that sort of thing for that first year, and it was great fun and everything. And then I kind of got to the point where I was like, California is great. San Diego, I absolutely love San Diego. But you start to see how expensive things are, especially out in California.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
so I eventually got to the point where I started realizing that, but, I probably should also go into more detail. So there was a couple other things I was doing on the side besides going to school. So if we go back to the Pleasanton, the Highland Games, I met an actress there. Her name's Louise Linton. Well, now it's Louise Nuchin. She married Stephen Nuchin, the former Secretary of the Treasury for the U.S.
Okay.
So I met her, and she was like, what do you want to do with your life? And, I told her I had given thought to acting. She's like, well, what's stopping you from doing that? And I said, well, I don't know where the heck to begin. It's
Yeah.
uncharted territory. And, it's very hard for people. I knew it was very, very hard for people to get to where they wanted to be. So we communicated. I mean, we still communicate today. I still
Very
have,
nice.
we still text each other and keep in touch with each other, even though she's like, you know, I think over Christmas we communicated a little bit, and she was sending me pictures of her newborn daughter, and she's like, "Oh, I'm in Scotland, or I'm on my way to Scotland right now." I'm like, "Oh man, I'm just sitting
Wow.
here in good old little old town Wisconsin." But she uh, she taught me what I needed to do, the type of resume I would need, and to go and take some acting classes, and recommended one of her acting coaches out to me. So every Tuesday I would drive from San Diego to Los Angeles and go to
Hmm.
acting classes for about half the day, and then I drive back down, which it's about a 3 hour drive one way, depending on how traffic is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was doing that, and then I got myself a manager, and then I ended up getting to do a feature film. It was called Phantom 2013,
Hmm.
uh, and it was about a Russian submarine that went rogue. And
Oh, wow.
so that had Ed Harris, William Fichtner,
Hmm.
David Duchovny, Sean Patrick Flannery, all those guys were in it. I don't know if you know who any of them
Oh,
are,
yeah.
but so I was a paid extra on that, and I ended up getting a couple SAG vouchers, which, for those that don't know, they're basically your pay stubs, and you need three of them to get into the Screen Actors Guild. So I was one
Oh, okay.
away,
All right.
and so we filmed this actually right down, where the hornblower would be in San Diego.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So we filmed it right down there. There's actually it's a submarine down there that's a museum,
Okay.
which I didn't even know about. Um, so they
I
use
didn't know
that
about
as the
that
movie
either.
set.
I know they had the big ship that's there, but I
Yeah.
didn't know about a submarine.
So it's like right by the Midway. It's more of like there's that other ship that kind of looks like a pirate ship. I can't remember what it was called though.
Yeah.
But it was like right hidden right there.
Hmm. That's really cool.
So we did this there, and it was just interesting because the two other guys that I got paired with, we were basically just acting as sailors up on top of the submarine, and I was I was told okay, like get up there, and you're gonna go all the way out to the front of the submarine. And this thing's you get up there and you look down, and there's obviously nothing but water.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a little high. But I'm walking out, and there's this very narrow walkway that you walk down the middle of this thing, and this thing's a museum, and I don't think they typically let people walk out on this thing,
Mm-hmm.
because the metal grating was actually so rusted out that our feet started breaking through and getting caught.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, oh, this really isn't good. So I'm trying to kind of scoot onto the outer edges of it and walk the distance to get out there. But I was fine with it. Um, and then, they call action, and they're like, you're going to catch this rope. So they throw this big rope up to you, and you got to catch it and just act like you're basically putting it somewhere,
Right.
because they're basically putting the submarine into the dock.
Gotcha.
So, we go with this throughout the night, and then one of the guys that I was kind of working with, he started raising a fuss about, our feet busting through the grate. Well, he
Right.
was already part of the Screen Actors Guild, so he called one of the SAG reps down, and I had no idea what this meant or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
apparently he ruffled some feathers and made some people not too happy, because all of a sudden, I mean, it was good for us because we got hazard paid bumps, I guess, so we got more money.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But so I got done with my second day of filming, and I go to kind of the trailer you go to check out or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy was like, if 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 you ever bring that guy on one of our sets again, we're basically gonna blacklist you. And I'm like, I don't even know the guy. This is the first time I've ever met him, and we just worked a few hours together tonight. I said, don't blame me for whatever he did, because I'm not with him.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, like, that's cutthroat. Like, you raise crap on a movie set, and it's like, that's it.
Wow. That's insane.
But it was a really good experience. And, to do something that I had, you get out of the Marine Corps, and it's like you're going for a goal,
Right.
and just not really knowing how to get there. But then you have these kind of pieces that fall into place, and then you just kind of take off with it. When someone, like Louise, she sent me down this path of, do these things and do this, and then everything just kind of started falling together.
Mm-hmm.
And it started falling together for me pretty quick, because right after I did that, I did a short film for a graduate student at SDSU. And that got it turned into its own DVD. So I had a small role in that, played a speaking role.
Very nice.
And I got a copy of that. I still have it. And to kind of like see, your face on the back page of it, it's like just having a piece of that, to like be like, hey, I did this.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's really cool.
so those three things kind of ended my time in San Diego. Like I said, I started realizing how expensive things were out there, and I was having an amazing time doing acting. I was like, if I'm going to continue to do something like this, I would like to have a plan B just in case something doesn't work out. So I said, all right, I'm going to move back home, and I'm going to go to college in Wisconsin. And, if it all works out, I'll come back to San Diego, and I'll come back to acting later. So I
Right.
came back home, and I started pursuing nursing at Edgewood College for a while.
Okay.
And Edgewood's great. But I suck at math, and I suck at chemistry. I tried everything to try to learn how to do both. I went before class, I stayed after class for both statistics and chemistry, and I still C's get degrees. That's all I'm gonna say, because that's what I got.
That's
Um,
okay. It's okay.
yeah, right.
There's a reason there's a C. So,
Exactly. So, my advisor, she was like, if you're gonna do nursing, you've got to have better grades than C's. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, all right, well, this ain't looking good. So I kind of started thinking to myself, I'm like, what else can I do that I know I'd be happy with and good at? And it was actually my grandfather who, he's like, why don't you become a surgical technologist? And I'm like, what the heck is that? What is this thing?
Yeah.
And so I did some research on it. Um, and I found out that it's basically you're the guy that was responsible for all the surgical instruments, and you hand them to all the doctors during surgery. And I said, that kind of sounds cool.
Yeah.
So I shifted gears and switched colleges, and I started going to school for that. And at the same time, I also ended up auditioning for um, Raymond Software, and this is going back to more acting stuff, but I
Okay.
auditioned to be in a video game. I didn't know what video game it was at the time. So they were like, here's a rubber rifle, and we want you to act like you're on patrol.
Hmm.
Like, oh, this brings back memories.
Yeah.
Well, I did everything just how they wanted to. I think they called me back like the next day and they're like, "Hey, when can you come and do some work for us?" And I kind of told them my class times and everything, and they worked around that. And so I go up to Raven Software. I think I was working up there for a few weeks. Um, and they brought me into this giant room that looked like a gymnasium, and it had all these infrared cameras around it. And they're like, "Have you ever done motion capture before?" And I said, "No." But I think I know what you're talking about. And so basically you just get into this suit and it has all these little like gray balls all over the place, like on all your joints and everything.
Yeah.
And
So
you
it kind of
look
tracks
up,
your movements and what you're doing then.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and they finally told us, they're like, "Hey, we're working on Call of Duty." And I said, "What?" It's like, that's kind of cool. So I did that for a few weeks and, got to do some more acting here at home, which I never even thought would be a possibility.
Right.
Never, I mean, it's Wisconsin. Let's face it, there's not much here. There's cheese, beer, and cheese curds, deep fried cheese curds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Which, by the way, very good. Very good.
yeah, they are good, especially if they squeak in your mouth. Then they're like fresh.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so I finished up with Call of Duty, and they pay pretty good, and then you get a copy of it and kind of get to, you play through it, and you can actually find out like we had like specific levels we were assigned to, so I could get to that level and be like, hey, I did that, or that was me. And
Oh,
well,
that's really
I
cool.
played I played the role of an enemy that fell off or gets shot in the head and has to basically fall off this balcony.
Oh, wow.
And in reality, it was just me tumbling over this bar onto a mat. But in the game, it's like you're falling 30 feet.
Yeah.
So it was, it's kind of cool to do that stuff. And then just, like I said, none of it would have been possible um, without like Louise's help. And then also just kind of the fundamentals you learn in the Marine Corps about, just you keep pushing forward,
Mm-hmm.
and just having that drive and that spirit to just keep going and do what it is that needs to get done to get
Right.
to where you want to be.
Yeah.
Um, so let's see. Yeah. So switched from Edgewood, went to Madison College, for my surge tech stuff. And that career I did for 3 years, and it's a very interesting career. It's
Mm-hmm.
very rewarding, and there's a lot of blood.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine. I mean, you're in surgery, right? You're right next to
Yep.
the doc as they're cutting on people and stuff.
Yeah. The it really gives you a new respect for just how much the human body can put up with and
Mm-hmm.
how much stress it can deal with. I mean, like when we're in boot camp and, you're going through kind of the physical stressors, now you get to this point where you get to see everyone's internal organs. And I mean, we're all created the same with some minute differences between male and female, obviously,
Yeah.
but we all have the same organs. They're all in the same places for the most part. Um, and now it was getting to see just how much a human body can actually withstand until it just can't take anymore and tanks out.
Wow.
So I worked at UW Hospital in Madison, which is a level 1 trauma facility. I worked there for 2 years. I specialized in vascular surgery and liver transplant specifically, but because it's a level 1 trauma facility, you also learn how to do pretty much every other surgery that there is.
Right.
And then we didn't just do liver transplants. We also did kidney transplants, pancreas transplants,
Wow.
you name it. And then any organ donations that would go on, we would also go in, harvest the organs from somebody,
Yeah.
um, and do all that too. But I
Now,
mainly specialized in vascular.
yeah. Now you were telling me a story when we were talking previously about a certain transplant. I can't remember what it was. but another country does it, and they take half of somebody's, was it the liver? Is that what was it?
Yeah. So Turkey, they don't believe in deceased donor transplants.
Right.
Um, they don't like taking whole organs from dead bodies, basically. So
Mm-hmm.
they do live donor liver transplants over there. So they cut your liver in half.
Mm-hmm.
For those that don't know, the liver is the only organ in the human body that can actually heal itself,
Wow.
just depending on how much you drink and tax it.
Mm-hmm.
So disclaimer,
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
mean that
Yeah.
you don't go out and drink yourself to death, because people do.
Mm-hmm.
But they cut the liver in half, and then they give that half to, the recipient, the person that needs it. And then those two people can go on about their happy way and, be happy
Yeah.
and
And it just
healthy.
regenerates, and then it's both of them end up with a full one at some point in time.
Yep. Yep. That's correct.
Wow. That's
But
amazing. And how in the world, like, who ever thought of all that stuff? That stuff is amazing to me.
yeah, I couldn't even tell you. It's so bizarre. Like I said, like it gives you a new appreciation for just like how precious our bodies are, and
Yeah, absolutely.
and how much they can take. But on a moment's notice, like stuff can just all of a sudden go south, and that's it. Like your time's up.
Yeah.
I had the unfortunate couple unfortunate times when we lost a couple patients on the OR table. We were
Mm-hmm.
doing uh, abdominal aortic aneurysm repairs. So basically, the aorta is your main artery that kind of runs straight down the center of your
Mm-hmm.
body from your heart. And
Right.
people get this big old bulge in it, which is called an aneurysm, and it's a weakening. And if you don't take care of it, it's like a ticking time bomb. So as
Mm-hmm.
soon as it dissects or splits, if you will, um, you're dead. There's nothing you can do, and you won't even know it, and you're gone.
Wow.
So I had one patient that we were doing this on, and we were in the middle of like sewing in the graft, and that's basically, think of it like PVC pipe,
Okay.
um, just sewing it from one end of the aorta to the other, and we're looking up at her blood pressures, and 1 minute they're fine, the next minute she's gone, like everything just flatlines, and it's just
Wow.
like, that's crazy, like everything was fine, like, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, I believe in God. I don't know if you do or
Oh yeah,
whatever,
I
but
do for sure. Yeah.
it's just crazy. It's like, did she just decide like, no, this is my time. Like, I don't want to go through this surgery, and just
Mm-hmm.
decide that this was it, So that was the first time I'd actually ever seen someone like die. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it wasn't like obviously they were under anesthesia,
Mm-hmm.
but clinically and everything, they're dead and they're not coming back.
Yeah.
So being around that for the first time was kind of weird. And of course you get out of there and everyone asks like, are you okay? And I'm like, oh, I'm fine. But I'll
Yeah.
tell you this, it's very different when it's someone that's not your own family or you're not your own friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it's very different. So I approach that with just kind of, that kind of Marine mentality of, this happened, but we need to keep pushing forward. You need to keep going.
Yeah.
It ended up happening again, same type of case, except this time there's a clamp that we clamp the aorta off to stop the blood flow so the person doesn't bleed out. Well, this
Right.
time the clamp slipped off.
Oh no.
Obviously not my doing, but it happened,
Right.
and the person just bled out.
Mm. Dang.
So very, very bloody cases.
Yeah.
I
Well,
was,
sorry.
oh,
I was gonna say. Now on your end, now Marines, that go to combat, they deal with stressful situations, and they see a lot of injuries and things of that nature, right?
yep.
They come back. Many get PTSD, and they struggle with those types of things. And it is changing. The atmosphere in the military is changing from you know, when you were in, and when I first came in, it was more of a, you don't go to medical, right? You're weak if you go to medical.
Oh yeah.
Whereas now it's that whole thing is kind of shifting, where it's, hey, go get help, go and, seek out some help, now, is that something that you struggled with at some point in time when you were dealing with all those types of things?
Uh, no, not really. I mean, obviously, like in the moment where, like if you can tell a patient's like dying
Yeah.
and you're trying to save them, it does get really stressful. You know, we had a trauma come in one night and it was this little, I think he was probably right, like 14, 15 years old. He couldn't have been
Hmm.
any older than that. And he had gotten stepped on by a cow
Oof. Yeah.
and his liver was lacerated and he was actively like bleeding and they couldn't stop it. And we
Right.
get him into the trauma room and stuff. And thank God the liver transplant doctors that I normally work with were actually doing a liver transplant in another room. So I quick ran down there and I said, hey, you guys got to get to the trauma room like now, like this kid's about to die. And they actually stopped doing the transplant they were doing.
Wow.
Um, the patient was stable and anesthesia could stay there and maintain them, even
Hmm.
though they were, wide open. So they come into the trauma room and the kid's like crashing. I think we've shocked him like 3 or 4 times.
Oh my gosh.
And they're like, we need all of our transplant pans. And I said, I don't think we have anymore. They're going to have to come from downstairs. And the OR at UW, it's huge.
Yeah.
So they crank up the temperature in the room to about 100 degrees. So it's hot, you're sweating.
Hmm.
And the next thing I know, I'm sprinting back and forth between the sterile processing elevator and the trauma room, which are at complete opposite ends of the OR,
Oh wow.
and then just carrying these heavy pans back and forth and literally sprinting.
Yeah.
And then you get in there and us as techs, when stuff gets really crazy, we'll scrub in 2 to 1 case. So there's 2 of us per 1 case. So I
Right.
started scrubbing in to help with stuff and get stuff set up because the tech that was in there at the time, she didn't really know all the transplant pans,
Gotcha.
and I did. So, I mean, it all just kind of goes in a blur.
Hmm.
Um, and that I think was probably one of the most stressful times for me. There's been plenty of other times where, people are bleeding out and it's like, we got to stop that bleeding. But it's weird because once you get the hang of it and you know what the doctors are going to do, you can start anticipating what they need and stuff. So it just
Yeah.
makes things easier. But I would say that, and not ever deploying and not ever really been in like, a gunfight per se.
Right.
I don't know if I can speak to that being the same type of stress because I think there's that like fog of war that they go through
Right.
over there. And, I don't want to assume things, but I will say that I think that the stress and stuff is probably different.
Okay.
And, I've got my couple really good friends of mine, that I talked about way at the beginning,
Hmm.
Jake and Justin, and they both went in the Marine Corps just like I did. Actually, I was able to play at their graduation ceremony while I was at MBSD for both of them.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That was cool because then obviously I met up with them afterwards and we, went out to eat and everything and
Yeah.
to see their families again and like, hey, we're all Marines now,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was very cool. Um, so my buddy Justin, he was a mortarman and Jake was motor T and they both did deployments over in Afghanistan.
Right.
And I almost lost them as friends, here it's been quite a while now, but they both had some sort of PTSD and we had a falling out,
Hmm.
both of them. And I was just shocked. And I'm like, something obviously happened over there
Hmm.
and they're not doing well over here, but they ended up getting help. And then they both came back to me and were like apologizing.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, now we're the best of friends again, but there's something over there that happens to some of them. And I don't know what it is. So I'm not going to speak to it. If you have someone that's able to speak on it, I would love to hear their story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's just something I don't think I'm going to touch.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. When I was deployed, I saw quite a bit of like mortar attacks and individuals that got hurt and stuff like that. So I wouldn't say like I was, in any gunfights or anything like that. But, I saw my fair share of blood while I was there.
Yeah.
And I will tell you my experience when I came back, I did have some PTSD from it. And my wife told me for years and years, hey, you need to go talk to somebody, go talk to somebody. Uh, and I eventually did, and recently within the last couple of years type of deal. And I finally did. I went and talked to somebody, talked to the doc, and it helped me out tremendously. So I would just advocate for anybody that's out there, if you're going through a hard time, you know, take the steps to go to medical, go to the VA. The VA has a website. I talked about that on my last fireside chat thing. It was basically a safety brief, is what I said it was. But went down the VA website, and it was the crisis hotline. So I mean, go to those websites and call the numbers. It's 988, and then you press one after. If you're having issues, go get help. Go, I will tell you from my experience, it helped me tremendously. I know several individuals that going to medical and getting that help has helped them out as well. But don't just continue holding on to it, because it's just going to pile on more and more and more. And suicide is a big thing. Was it 22 veterans a day is what they say,
Yeah.
committing suicide. So, obviously we want to try and stay away from that. And I just encourage people go out and get that help that they need. Same thing in what you're dealing with in your when you were doing the medical stuff, and those first responders and all those people that have to deal with that. I imagine that eventually it's going to wear on you, if you do it long enough and continuously and stuff like that. Um,
Oh yeah.
Same
Yeah.
thing for
Actually,
those
this.
guys. Go get help.
Yeah. Yeah. Last year, we had an incident that actually it did affect me finally,
Mhm.
and when I was doing surgery and everything, it didn't matter how much blood I saw and stuff. I really didn't ever have one case that kind of, pushed me over the edge. You know what I mean? I was cutting off
Yeah.
people's legs and you name it, I was doing it. Um, but so, I was a tech for 3 years, and
Mhm.
my third year I did at the VA. So I was working on all the veterans and stuff. And that
Okay.
was very rewarding because I felt like I was giving back to them.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, and then after that, I had this thought, because I was like, well, I don't think I want to do this forever.
Mhm.
And mainly it was the administration part of things, with the hospitals that I didn't care for, and that some of the doctors, they lose their sense of being a person after a while.
Yeah.
We'll just
Yeah.
say they're very special people. Some of the doctors I absolutely loved. Some of them I absolutely hated, because it's like, who the heck are you? I
There's no human aspect in it. It becomes more of robotic, or I'm just here to, facilitate something, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And and then they start blaming you for their own issues during the case. And all I'm doing is handing them the tools.
Yeah.
But
I could see how that would be frustrating.
oh yeah, yeah. But anyway, so I went on a ride along with a buddy of mine who was a police officer, and after that ride along, I said, I think this is really what I want to do, and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And
Okay.
we hadn't even gotten to COVID yet, or any of the craziness with the whole George Floyd thing.
Mhm.
None of that happened yet. So, you know, as far as law enforcement at this time, they were still pretty much pretty respected for the most part.
Right.
Um, so I decided, I'm gonna go and be a cop. So I quit, put in my 2 weeks at the VA, and I started at the police academy like 2 weeks after that, here back in 2019.
Okay.
Um, and the police academy, mm, it's a semester long.
Mhm.
Some people think that it's a boot camp.
Yeah.
I could see where people would say that. However, for me, I was laughing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I had a lot of fun with it, to be honest. And I helped some people get through it
Mhm.
that were having some issues, and it wasn't really with, the mental part of it, but some people just needed some help with like the firearms and the
Right.
physical fitness stuff. Um, but I got to ask you something. Do you remember getting OC'd?
Oh God, do I ever? Yeah, I remember. It's a
So
very unpleasant thing, and I don't know if I would wish that on my worst enemy. I'll be honest, it was horrible.
I I remember watching you go through that day, and still to this day. And I'm like, how tall are you again?
6'1".
You're 6. Yeah, I'm 5'9", and I remember watching you just like not have a good time with it. Like
Oh yeah.
I was like, "Oh, he's hurting, and he's hurting bad."
It was horrible. It was horrible. Now I don't know it because I did it twice. So the first time I did it, it had to have been when you were there was the first time.
Yeah,
And so I went to the next year, 2 years later, something like that. I was out there and they were like, everyone's complaining, oh, this sucks and da 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 da. And I was like, you guys are just being weak. So I was like, I'll just do it again, whatever. And so I did it again, and not like the level 2, right, where they wipe something on you. No, I
yeah.
did the level 1. They spray it in your or on your forehead or whatever, and yeah, I immediately regretted the decision as soon as it happened. I was like, that was the dumbest thing I've ever done. And yeah, I mean, I made it through, but it was not pleasant.
So, and this is a little did I know that in the police academy, yeah, you got to get sprayed again. They didn't care how many times I had done it in the past. They're like, yeah, you got to get sprayed. And the
Oh my
course
God.
that you have to run after you get sprayed, it's worse than it was in the Marines.
Oh yeah, I imagine so.
So, um, police academy was fun. You know, get no seat. I still hate it too. I've been sprayed a handful of times now. And it never gets any easier.
No,
But
not at all.
I've just kind of figured out a magic formula to get it out of my eyes right away. Dawn dish soap
Oh,
and,
okay.
uh, and water.
That's good to know. So for anybody out there that has to get OC sprayed, you say Dawn dishwashing soap and water.
It's got to be Dawn because Dawn is heavy on getting the oils off your skin.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't put the Dawn in your eyes. That's not
Right.
going to be good. You just put the Dawn on your skin to get the
Mm-hmm.
oils from the capsaicin and all that stuff. Get that off your skin,
Yeah.
and then just wash your eyes out excessively with water.
Yeah. 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 Well, I will tell you, um, if nobody hones in on anything that you've said, that part right there very important. So if you're getting OC sprayed, you know, do that.
Do that. If there's anything you care about, just remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so got through the police academy and I ended up working for my local sheriff's office for a year and a half. I worked down in the jail dealing with, Southern Wisconsin's finest criminals.
Yeah.
Um, and then I
Hey, well, let's go
got
back to the
approached.
jail thing real quick.
Oh, sure.
What did you have any tense moments or anything like that with inmates?
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, all the time, they try to get away with anything and everything.
Mm-hmm.
They, and it's crazy because, nowadays they get like TV.
Mm-hmm.
They get, 3 hots and a cot. They get books. They can write letters. I mean, they have a lot of freedom nowadays,
Yeah.
compared to how things used to be. And they'll always yell at you, scream at you, bang on the door,
Yeah.
they'll tell you, they'll threaten you, they'll threaten to go and kill your family or,
Oh wow.
um, do whatever. And it's like, well, you don't know me. You don't know where I live. So
Yeah.
whatever.
Holy
Um,
cow.
Yeah, so there is that aspect of that.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, as long as you respected them, they
Yeah.
respected you. Like even now being an officer in my hometown, after my year and a half in the jail, I've been with my local department now for, it'll be 3 years in May.
Okay.
Um, I've seen people that I dealt with down in the jail and not a single one of them were like, F you, I hated you in the jail. I'm not going to deal with you now. Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
fight you, whatever. A lot of them actually would shake my hand.
Oh, no kidding.
So there was kind of this just kind of mutual respect, like, hey, you jacked up, you're here, you know why you're here,
Mm-hmm.
and leave it at that. But yeah, you do still have the people that they just have no respect for law enforcement or
Yeah.
whatever, and they're going to hate you no matter what.
Yeah. 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 Well, I
Um,
mean, at least you've learned. You're very respectful of people, and I've known you for a little while, and what I know of you, you're very respectful. So, and you're right. That goes a long ways. No matter what you're in, it doesn't matter if you're a cop, if you're military, whatever. It doesn't matter. If you show respect, people show respect back to you.
oh yeah, big time, big time. You know, and I'll go back to now that we've kind of caught up with kind of the tail end of things on my end here.
Hmm.
You know, you'd asked the question earlier about, you know, the whole PTSD and having like any sort of like stressful situations in surgery
Yeah.
and stuff. And yes, it, like I said, it does get stressful, but, particularly here, last January. So
Hmm.
we're about a year ago now.
Okay.
So I was also a volunteer firefighter for my hometown for quite a while too.
Okay.
I stopped doing that here last June.
Okay.
Um, so I was on duty one night and I had just gotten home from lunch, or I just got home to eat lunch,
Right.
and I got a call, and they said there is someone that went down at the gym. Uh, he is not conscious, but he's breathing,
Okay.
and I'm thinking, okay, that's not good. So I, you know, light sirens, go over there and pull out my med bag from the back of the SUV. And, you know, I had been to a lot of, we call them PMBs, pulseless non-breathers.
Yeah.
And none of them phased me. You know, I've had a bunch of people die on me at this point,
Hmm.
or not come back, or to the point where we don't even give any shocks to them. They're just gone,
Right.
you know, but they're still warm. They're not
Hmm.
even cold. um, And the guy comes out of Anytime Fitness and he's like, "Hey, you need to get in here now. Like this guy's not, he's not looking good." And I'm like, "Okay, you know, it's fine. I'm here. It's going to be okay." And I get in the door and I see who's laying on the floor and I'm like, "Oh crap, like, that's my fire chief."
Oh, dang.
And, he's actually family to me,
Hmm.
like legit family. So things like a switch flipped and I went from zero to like a million and
Hmm.
I just start, your training kicks in and I can go all the way back to everything you learn in boot camp,
Hmm.
everything you learn in the military. This is, this is when now, including all my medical training that I learned, this is when everything kicks in. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I said, it's different when it's family. So you're down there and you're like rushing.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I remember pulling the AED out of my bag and the little tiny specific details that I remember are just nuts because I can remember the smell of his vomit being on the floor
Wow.
because he was aspirating bad,
Hmm.
and I remember trying to flip the AED cover open, and for whatever reason I couldn't get the darn thing open, and the
Hmm.
trainer had already started CPR, and I was like, "You got one over there? Let's just use yours," and I'm still flipping the darn plastic piece trying to get this thing open, and finally it opens up, and I said, "No, wait. You stay on the chest. I'm going to get this thing going." So, you know, we cut his shirt off and I get the pads on him, get the AED on, and it finally calls for a shock. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, this is good. That means there's still something there."
Yeah.
So we give him one shock. Nothing happens. And I'm like, "All right, get back on the chest." So I'm monitoring the AED. And, you know, here a few minutes later, now all of a sudden EMS and my fire department starts showing up and they
Right.
don't know who it is yet. So EMS gets there and we have this, it's called a Lucas machine. Have you ever
Yeah.
heard of
I've
it?
heard of it. I don't know exactly what it is, but I have heard of it.
So all it does is it does compressions for you. So
Okay.
you don't
Okay.
have to do them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
very effective because it's a machine, right? So
Yeah.
it does
You're
the,
not getting wore out doing it yourself, right? Getting out of
exactly,
breath.
exactly. So you're delivering maximum quality CPR to
Yeah.
somebody, with this machine. So we get that on them, that takes over. And now all my, you know, firefighters start rolling in and I look up and I'm like, "Oh God, this ain't going to be good." So
Hmm.
I just start like going over to everybody, including my chief's brother, who is just like, he's just standing there and staring.
Hmm.
And I told him, I said, "You know, we're working on him. They're working on him. Just," he's like, "You got to go and, you know, deal with his wife and stuff, who obviously I know very well."
Yeah.
And that night, everything kind of hit me bad.
Hmm.
So if you want to, the whole like kind of PTSD thing, after that, I couldn't sleep for probably like 2 or 3 days straight.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's literally the exactly what PTSD is, right?
Yeah.
Stressful situations and things that affect you mentally as you're dealing with it. So yeah, 100% PTSD.
Yeah, I mean, and it was just weird because up until that point, I was like, there's not a lot of stuff that really phases me.
Hmm.
Well, that night it did, and it got me so much to the point where I was still supposed to work for another like I think it was like 3 or 4 hours after all this happened.
Hmm.
And um, the sheriff's department, a few of the deputies that I used to work with when I was there, they actually ended up coming down, and one of them stayed with me outside because I was a mess. He
Hmm.
turned off my body camera and he's like, "You're done." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You're not working the rest of tonight." So our new chief, we just got a new chief. I called him and I was like, "You got to come down here." Um, I was the only one on,
Hmm.
so I needed people. So I called my chief. He came down, and then our school resource officer, she was actually up teaching a class, and I called her and I said, "You got to get out of that class and you got to come down here right now."
Yeah.
Um, so I got people down there, and yeah, I didn't work the rest of the night that night.
Wow.
And it's just crazy because in the last, so like, man, we lost our chief, and when we've lost about 2 or 3 other firefighters from our department within like the last 3 years, 3, 4 years.
Kidding. Yeah.
It's been
Older,
one every 18 months.
older individuals or
Middle aged, like two
really?
died from cancer.
Mm.
One was actually killed by a drunk driver when he was trying to help somebody out on a belt line on New Year's Eve a few years back,
Yeah.
and then now our chief.
Good Lord.
So I said my firefighting days are over.
Hmm. Yeah.
So now I just, I worry about the police side of things.
Hmm.
And this job, it's very stressful now,
Hmm.
especially with everything that's happened in these last few years.
Oh yeah.
Um, but it's also very rewarding, and I'm fortunate enough to work where I do because we still have a decent community that supports us, but we also do get the riffraff from, our interstate that's right here in town.
Yeah.
So, there's there's definitely those days where I'm like stressed out to the max, and you're dealing with we call them a no person,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter what you tell them, they're gonna fight you and
Yeah.
do whatever. Um, so I, and I know we're kind of getting close to that hour here, so I'll
Oh, you're
start kind
fine.
of,
Don't worry about it.
okay. But yeah, the whole, my whole career, like in the Marine Corps, doing the 4 years, and then all my healthcare stuff and everything, my acting, and then being a cop now, there is absolutely no way, uh, without a doubt, that I would have been able to do any of this if it weren't for the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter what you do in the Marine Corps, like your job per se. It doesn't matter if you're in the infantry. It doesn't matter if you're a bandsman. It doesn't matter if um, if you were in like logistics, or,
Right.
you just were doing paperwork at the company office. It's the fundamental things that you'll learn in not only in boot camp, but as you kind of go throughout about your Marine Corps career, that if you apply those things after you get out, that's how you succeed. That's how you be successful. And there's no way that any of this in my life would have happened without the Marine Corps.
Yeah. And that's awesome, man. And you've done so well for yourself. Uh, I am thoroughly impressed with what you've done throughout your life. I mean, yeah, you've done things way more than I will ever do. But and still continuing like being a police officer, you're dealing with all the stress that you're dealing with, and my hat's off to you, man. You're doing a heck of a job. It's amazing.
Hey, I mean, I appreciate that. I appreciate your support. It's someone's got to do it. And nowadays I kind of almost feel in a way that, there's a lot of officers that can almost relate to, the Marines in some sort of aspect, because,
Yeah,
they always said that there's 1% of the population in the United States that'll go and join the Marine Corps.
yeah,
1%. And now I kind of almost feel like, law enforcement at a whole is almost like that, because
yeah,
there's not a lot of people that want to do this job anymore.
yeah.
And we are so short. Like there's a lot of nights where I'm on all by myself and my backup is 10, 15 minutes away.
Wow. Yeah, it's a rough go, I think, for any police force, police officer, sheriff, whatever. It's a rough go right now. And I think it's cyclic. It will eventually flip back over.
Oh
Same
yeah,
thing with the
yeah,
military. Sometimes the military is very, like, you remember when 9/11 happened and all of a sudden the military became very important.
yep.
And, it was a very rewarding thing. And then it just kind of has flipped a little bit. But I think it will eventually flip back around, just depending on our nation and where we're sitting at that point in time.
Oh yeah.
But I'll tell you, and anybody else that's in law enforcement and doing those things, like what you guys do is so important. Um, I 100% thank you guys for it because it's a tough job, and I would just encourage you, if you're getting stressed out, anything like that, same thing that we're talking about, like, go get some help. Don't be too proud. That's my personal advice to you guys.
Oh yeah.
Um, but other than that, man, just you got to stay safe. Do what you got to do. Keep pushing, like you say, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Like I said, it's those fundamentals that you learn that that mission accomplishment, and just keep
Yeah,
pushing until that mission's done, no matter what it is.
yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, man. Before we end it, what is, I guess, your words of wisdom that you want to push out to everybody? Anything that like impactful that you want to say, or if you just want to give shouts out to people, that's fine too. But I want to give you the time here to say what it is that you would like to say here.
Oh man, yeah. I I just can't stress enough, especially for younger people and for people that are, in that kind of that transition phase of getting out of the service. And it really doesn't even matter what branch you're in at all. Um, take those things that you've learned from the military and apply them. Because as soon as you do that, and as soon as you start to kind of figure out what your niche is and what you want to do, and you apply those fundamental things that you learned in the military, you're going to succeed. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And when the going gets tough, you just revert back to what they told you,
Yeah,
and you're going to succeed.
yeah, great advice, man. 100%. Well, hey, man, it's great catching up with you. I love hearing your stories, and I mean, I think it hits home to me, and I think it'll hit home to a lot of people that listen as well. So, thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing some of the kind of intimate moments that you had throughout your career as well, and talking about some of that. There will be a lot of individuals that can relate to that. So, very very helpful in that sense. So, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, for sure. It was a great time. I'm really glad we got to do this.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And we'll have to get together again another time for sure.
Yeah,
But with that, hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I know I'm having a heck of a time hosting them. And like I said before, if you want to be on and you want to tell your story, shoot me an email, The Lost Art with Andrew Cox at gmail.com. And with that, stay motivated and change your socks.